Welcome to Real World, Real Talk with Dr. D.Z. Cofield. The show represents captivating conversations and insightful information to encourage and inspire you with all you need to become the best you can possibly be. And now, your host for Real World, Real Talk, Dr. D.Z. Cofield. What's going on, Houston? Welcome to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. You're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz and more, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial and KTSUradio.com. I want to thank you for being with us on tonight. We are going to deal with a subject that we don't talk about a lot in our community, but I think it is vitally important in light of everything that's going on in our world. We're seeing numbers go up in this area. We're seeing a lot of family hardship and heartache around it. And we have an expert scheduled to be with us today to share with us from a clinical perspective. And then we have a mother to share with us tonight to talk about what it feels like to deal with the subject that we are going to deal with. And I am really looking forward to it. I really believe there are shows that I get an opportunity to do here on KTSU and on the World Wide Web that I literally know change and save lives. And tonight is one of those shows. We had this scheduled earlier in the month, actually last month, and then a series of things started happening, including the presidential election and our national and local election results. And so we ended up pushing it back. But it's really, really important that we deal with this subject on tonight. Now, just a couple of housekeeping matters before we get started. If you'd like to follow me during the week, you can follow me on Instagram at DZ Cofield. You can follow me on Facebook at DZ Cofield, and you can follow me on Twitter at DZ Cofield. If you have a show suggestion that you would like to give, we would love to hear from you as well. What do these people have in common? The most famous queen, arguably in the world, Cleopatra, author and adventurous Ernest Hemingway, fashion designers Alexander McQueen and Kate Spade, television personality Anthony Bourdain, Hall of Fame football player Junior Seau, and comedian actor Robin Williams. Well, the sad truth is all of them have taken their life through the act of suicide. People who are perceived to have a good life are thought to be immune to problems in life, including mental health problems. But the truth is everyone is susceptible to problems in life, many battling with their private demons away from the public eye, which means many people would not know they were struggling with their mental health. When a famous person takes their life, the world is left in shock. But the same is true for anyone who has lost a family member in this tragic way. Losing someone to suicide is one of the most difficult experiences that is emotionally unimaginable. And in the midst of the three international pandemics that we're all dealing with, COVID-19, economic upheaval, racial injustice, everyone is experiencing a heightened sense of stress, anxiety, and depression. Today, we will talk about a subject that many work hard to avoid, and that's suicide. Just recently, in the last several months, we had a young lady who my wife saw grow up in her life tragically. Not long before that, one of her classmates ended her life. And it seems like this is becoming an epidemic as people are struggling with just how to make it day to day. And this is beyond just, Lord, you can take me home if you're ready for me. This is a sense of hopelessness that we're seeing many people in our society have. And man, we want to talk about it on tonight. I want you to listen to these statistics. The Center for Disease Control reports that suicide is the third leading cause of death among 10 to 24-year-olds, behind accidents and homicides. Every 12 minutes, someone in the U.S. dies by suicide. For every one suicide, there are 25 attempts. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S., and the numbers and rates of this dreaded death are rising. Each year, more than 900,000 emergency department visits are made by people who were attempting suicide. And this is not just a young people issue. This is a generational issue. And we're seeing it affecting people of all ages. Our show today is really designed to help you if you are feeling depressed, feeling isolated, are dealing with mental health trauma, or just need someone to talk to. And I'm happy to welcome to Real World Real Talk tonight, Dr. Reneta Nero. She is a PhD professor of psychology and the Sharon K. Burroughs Professor at Houston Baptist University. In addition to her teaching responsibilities, she is a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice and the chair of the executive board for the Ashley Jardine Foundation. AJF is a suicide awareness and prevention organization that educates communities about the importance of mental health and supporting young people who are at risk for suicide. Dr. Nero is a former president of the Southwest Region Board of Directors for the Christian Association for Psychological Studies and a member of the Texas Psychological Association. We also welcome to Real World Real Talk tonight, Mrs. Cheryl Duncan. She is the founder of the Ashley Jardine Foundation. The Ashley Jardine Foundation was started in loving memory of her daughter, Ashley Jardine Duncan, who died by suicide 8 years ago at the age of 17. The foundation's mission is to increase community awareness about teen suicide prevention. The board consists of women and men who volunteer their services at health fairs, conferences, schools, and other community events to encourage mental health, wellness, and to help our young people hold on. She has been a registered nurse for 37 years and is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Alpha Kappa Omega Chapter, and the Sigma Theta Tau Nursing Honor Society, Theta Nu Chapter. I want to welcome both of these ladies to Real World Real Talk. It's great to have you with us on today. Hey, Dr. Nero. Hey, Mrs. Duncan, how are you? Everybody doing good?
You? Good to see you, Dr. Cofield. Thank you for having us.
Great. Man, I want you to know I'm so excited about tonight because, there was so much stress, so much anxiety going on around the election. And now, everybody's kind of fraught on a various levels on the scale as to what the current president is going to do. What I want to do before we go any further, Dr. Nero, I want you to help us establish some baselines for our discussion tonight. So if you would, help us define some terms: mental health, mental illness, and mental wellness.
Certainly. Well, when it comes to mental illness, that means that an individual has a disorder that will probably affect them in several areas, that it will affect probably the way in which they think. It can also affect the way in which they perceive. So in other words, they may have some perceptions of things going on around them that other people are not experiencing. And it can also impact the way in which the person may feel. And so they may have extremes when it comes to emotions. And so there is something that is called a normal range of mood. And so if a person has a mental illness, that means that now their mood is outside of a certain range, or maybe their anxiety is falling outside of a range in which one might consider to be normal. And so that means that several areas of functioning are going to be impacted when a person has a mental illness. And when a person is in mental health, that means that they are typically functioning well, that they have a modicum of health that allows them to do the things that they need to be able to do. And this is something that an individual would monitor to make sure that they're staying within good mental health. And mental wellness is something that people are striving towards, to be mentally well. Right now, we are seeing a surge in understanding something called positive psychology. that means that we can have more and beyond functioning that we typically may have considered. And with mental wellness, we can have more of that abundance of health that we are now going to use to really benefit us when it comes to making sure that we take advantage of opportunities, making sure that we are functioning at an optimal level. And so now we are more concerned about experiencing mental wellness than we have in previous periods of time.
How have the three pandemics that I mentioned earlier, how have they contributed to the risk of suicidal behavior? We're seeing, domestic violence cases going up. We're seeing robberies and criminal activity going up. Some of that's related to COVID. Some of that is related to the economic recession that people are experiencing. How is it contributing to the risk of suicidal behavior?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I'm so glad that you asked that, because one of the things that people are actually noting is that the jury is actually out in terms of how it is impacting suicidal behavior. And in fact, the vice president for research at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention says we're actually about 2 years away from having that data. And they're not actually sure if the pandemic is actually causing an increase in rates to suicide. What they are noting is that there is more likely to be a reporting of high profile suicides. And so there has been at least one suicide associated with a physician who's been on the front lines. And so that tends to get reported in the media and people hear about it. But it is not real clear exactly how suicides are being impacted when it comes to the pandemic. And one of the things that they're actually finding is that people may actually be more resilient than we may have thought previously. And that when there is a pandemic like this, that people may actually begin to feel comforted in knowing that stress is a normal reaction. And so some of the things that they are feeling, they're understanding that everyone else is feeling this too, and that they are not alone. And so it is something that is certainly being monitored, but at this time, the jury is still out. What I will say is that the American Psychological Association reported back in June that African Americans were reporting additional anxiety, but it appeared to be due to the social injustice pandemic. This was not long after the murder of George Floyd, and there appeared to be an uptick in the numbers of African Americans reporting stress and anxiety. But when it comes to the pandemic and suicidal behavior, those are some things that we're waiting to see how the pandemic is actually impacting that.
Wow, it's amazing you say that. They didn't call me and ask me for my my input on that survey, but I would have definitely said yes, without question. Just the rise in anxiety and the rise in stress. Before I get Mrs. Duncan on to begin telling her very compelling story, I would like for you to give our audience an idea of what is a suicidal ideation. What does that mean? Because I think people, all of us are going through stress. All of us are feeling some anxiety. And as I stated earlier, especially for people who are people of faith, I don't know if there's not a time in your life, at least one time, when you're saying, okay, Lord, if you want me to go home now, I'm sure ready, but define for us what a suicidal ideation is.
Okay, certainly I would do that. And first, I'd like to mention that suicide is not a diagnosis. It is not a diagnosis. However, it can be a byproduct, or suicidal ideation can certainly be a byproduct of a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder. And so if that disorder is not treated, or if it is not treated well, then what may happen is the person may begin to experience helplessness and hopelessness. The other thing that the person may experience, if that mood disorder or anxiety disorder is not treated or not treated well, the person may begin to question their worth, their value. They may experience an extreme amount of guilt. They may have a very, very difficult time feeling relaxed. They may feel overwhelmed, and that can lead to a person considering ending their life as an option. One of the things that's been found in people who have attempted suicide, the common denominator for people who have attempted suicide when they go and interview them is hopelessness. That when a person begins to experience this extreme mood, this extreme anxiety, they have a sense that there is nothing to look forward to, that this is a pain that is going to be there. And when a person becomes this way, their options begin to narrow in terms of what can be done. So there's the hopelessness that things aren't going to get better, and the helplessness that there's nothing that can be done about it. And so with suicidal ideation, these are thoughts of ending one's life or thinking that people would be better off if they were no longer around, or that this is the only option they have to ending pain. So they have ideation. There are people who have ideation and they never go the next step, which would be a plan. And so putting a plan in motion. And so maybe acquiring a weapon to end their lives, or thinking about a scenario where everyone is out of the house and this will be an opportunity for them to do harm to themselves, or planning where they might go in order to actually end their lives, or setting up a practice situation where they go through whether or not the gun will fire, or whether or not they have the pills or whatever kind of cocktail they're going to take in order to end their life. And so people may come up with plans, and then the next level would be the attempt. And so now the person actually makes the attempt to end their life. And the best predictor that a person will actually end their life by suicide is an attempt. That appears to be the number one predictor that a person will die by suicide, and that is making an initial attempt. And so the ideation is the thought. And if a person can get treatment at the point where they start having thoughts of suicide, that would be the ideal situation to begin to get help when a person begins to think that this is an option for ending pain.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, your number one source for jazz, The Choice, 90.9 KTSU. I want to thank all of you who are listening on the World Wide Web at ktsuradio.com. It was January the 30th, 2012, Mrs. Duncan, when your beautiful daughter took her life. And I know it's been a tremendous journey for you. Let me first, on behalf of our listening audience, give you our condolences. That there's nothing that we can say to make it feel better. And only somebody who's been in your shoes can even begin to understand how you feel. Talk to us about your daughter and what brought her in your mind to this point, and how you have taken that pain and turned it into something productive.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's just a pleasure to be here with y'all. And before I do talk about it, let me see if here's a picture of my daughter.
For those of you who are looking online, you could see Ashley's picture. She was a volleyball player.
Volleyball player. She was an artist. She played soccer. She was 5'11", beautiful smile. But the one thing with all the starting Ashley Jadine Foundation, it was because some people got together when we went for a walk, November 2012, and we got talking. And they were talking about we should do something, an organization. And I said, Why? How could I do? I failed. My daughter died. I couldn't save her. She had went to the hospital. She had medication. She had counseling. She had all that. But Ashley played her depression and her anxiety and her emotions through the social media. And through social media, a lot of them didn't really believe that she was in that much pain. But she wrote about emotionally and mentally not stable, but financial. And the day of that she died by suicide, she texted me. She was home, her father was home, and it was about when you go back and look at all her social media, she had been looking for a gun. And she had Twittered, she was a big Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, and she had put on Twitter, I finally got a gun. And we were looking for the key to his car. And that's how I was at work. And we ended up with a text that she told me I took my gun, my dad's gun. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired. I love you and goodbye. But she had attempted twice, like Dr. Nero said, with medication. So she had always told me she's not going to do anything. And she never really talked about her pain. I don't think she ever really gave me the real truth of how she felt. And plus, I wasn't on social media. Her father wasn't either, but her brother was on. But they had the worst argument they could have had Christmas, December the 2011. And they never talked anymore. And she had defriended him. So when I got the text, I said, okay, she's alive. There's no problem. I drive home. I see police and everything. She was gone. It was the hardest thing in my life, but I wanted to go see her. But they said, no, you can't go over there and see her. That was the hardest thing, not to be able to lay my eyes on my child. So we had family, we had friends, everybody came. And then I would try to sneak out to go see her. And I didn't get to do that. That was always a hurting feeling. I really understand how people say at the scene, no, that's a crime scene, you can't see him. I got through that. We got through the funeral. And like I said, we had the text. That was the day of. We had people to come and interview. And they came and nobody, her father didn't want me to talk. People said no. But the one thing I did say to someone was talk more, text less. And that was something I could. But when later on that year, in October, September, a lady came again and wanted to interview. And I really wanted to talk, to tell that Ashley did have help. She had help. But it just wasn't enough because she had told me, I'm not like you. I have to do this. And that was so hard because we were very strong in education. She had an older brother, was in college, Morehouse. He got his degree in chemistry. And separation anxiety started about 2010. In those 2 years, she went to the hospital. But it was a real shameful, real hurting feeling that you have to get mental health warrants for your child. It's like, what could I do? What didn't I do? But her father didn't agree with counseling. So me and her would go to counseling. And it's real important that the family come together. And even at school, Ashley showed her smile and people says, oh, what's wrong with her? There's nothing wrong. And I used to say, but she's not feeling well. She's not doing well. She's missing school. But Ashley was a loving child. And when we started Ashley Dream Foundation, it was a way to celebrate her life, to keep her name and her honor, not by the way she died, but who she was, to use her voice to help somebody so that they wouldn't be alone like I was. You know, I ended up having to go to counseling and I had support groups and things like that, because when we add up all this, I had a suicide already in my life. My sister, 30 years old, and this was July the 8th, 1995. From 95 to 2012, I never talked about suicide, her depression. I was so angry how someone that beautiful could end her life. Here, I'm a nurse. It's very different taking care of a patient, but being a family member in the situation. But she died, and I just shut it up. And then Ashley started her depression, her anxiety. And I said, I'm going to win this, and I'm going to do everything I could, because I felt I didn't do enough for my sister. But then you come and she dies. So God gave me and told me, you know, you need to stop the shame, the silence, and the stigma, because it's a stigma that is involved with mental illness and suicide. You're all in a class by yourself because someone chose to end their life. and you tried to help them. And I know her friends tried, but I kept this very quiet because I'm a quiet person, a personal person. I wasn't on social media. You learn, you take care of your business in your house. So when my family and everything happened and she died, it was such a shock. But some of the cousins and them that had been on social media know that she was defriending them. As she showed a big smile, like she posted on Instagram, this is when I was happy. I found so much information on social media that it just hurts my heart that I wasn't on. And that other people at the time in 2010, 2011, 2012, this child's not going to hurt herself. She has a beautiful house. You call the police over, they look at you, they look at her. Why are you calling us? You know, I've used CERT. I've used those different things that were out there to come help you. But because of where we lived, how she was, she doesn't have that image that you think someone is going to be laying on the floor, a homeless person. She was a child that could mask how she felt and pull it off. But when you don't go to school, you feel hopeless. You start sleeping in the room with the shades down, and you start searching and getting the doctors and getting the help because she didn't want to play volleyball anymore. But that one time she got back on, and then her and her coach didn't get along anymore, and she got off. And she didn't choose anything else to help her to keep her mind going. Because when you exercise, you keep those serotonins moving. You know, you got to say something, you got to stay involved, and you got to stay updated. And that's where my guilt came in until the Lord said, you've done what you could, but you share her story and her voice. And through my Christian belief in God, it helped me get through this. You know, trusting in the Lord. You know, joy in the morning, weep at night. Blessed indeed. This too shall carry you through. And hope. You know, Jeremiah 29:11 tells you there's a plan. And I say with 17 years old, I got a good life with her. But through all that we've done with AJF, it's been a joy because scholarships that we give to high school seniors, $1,000 to help them get into their freshman year in college, gives me joy because I couldn't do that for Ashley. To give back to others, to help them, that's what we're all about.
Dr. Nero, let me ask you a question. I'm curious, you know, when Mrs. Duncan talks about calling for assistance and, you know, officers walk out and they say, you know, hey, we come into this upper middle class home. You have two professionals as parents, you know, you got your own room. They've seen so much worse out in the society, and they look and say, what are you talking about committing suicide? What did they miss? And what do we miss as a society? Because when you think about the names that I mentioned at the outset of the show, you would think those people have everything. They have millions of dollars, and like why would they commit suicide? There are people who are battling the same issues that they're battling and don't have near as much, and they're living life every day and fighting every day. What do we miss about suicidal thoughts and suicidal actions that those officers missed and that many of us miss as well?
Okay, that's a very good question. One of the things that people might say to someone who is suicidal, they'll say something like, what do you have to be suicidal about? You have this going for you, you've got that going for you, that there is a stereotype in terms of what a person who is suicidal would look like. And there is also this sort of stereotype that if you are a person of means, that you would not have something to be suicidal or absolutely hopeless about. And so what people fail to realize is that the underlying mental health condition, typically a mood disorder or anxiety, has probably gone untreated. There is still a stigma associated with mental illness. A person who would certainly have no problem going to the ER for a broken leg may feel as if they have to suffer with a mental illness and not get the help or treatment that is needed. And so the stereotype that a person who is suicidal would be down on their luck financially, would not have a place to stay, would not have family, would not be beautiful as Ashley was, would not be talented, gifted, going to one of the best high schools in the city, having professional parents, and the sense that this person really doesn't have anything to be sad about. And so what they're failing to realize is that when a person has a mental disorder, there can be a genetic component to that. There can be a biochemical component to a mental disorder that needs to be addressed. Mental illness runs in families. Suicide runs in families. There may be some dynamics going on at the home that would require family intervention or family counseling. And so those are the things that people miss. They are looking at the surface and failing to find out what is beneath that smile or what is beneath that mask.
One of the things Mrs. Duncan talked about that I'd like for you to talk about and expound upon is this idea of therapy, and
Yes.
not just individually, but I'd like to talk more about the family therapy.
Mhm.
You mentioned offline this idea of the identifying patient, the symptom bearer. If you would expound upon that, because I think in many instances, when we think about somebody who may have suicidal ideations or even attempted suicide, we see it as their problem and not
Mhm.
necessarily a family problem. How important is family therapy and family counseling as a treatment modality in addressing this kind of issue?
Okay. When it comes to teens, especially, it's been found that several different modalities may be important. And so there is a modality that deals with individual psychotherapy. And usually the treatment of choice is going to be some form of cognitive behavioral therapy, where you begin to look at some cognitive distortions that a person may have. And with teens, you also look at a way of having some form of peer acceptance, as peers are very important when it comes to the sense of mental well-being for a teen. You want to look at maybe having this teen evaluated for a medication. So there's several things you want to do, but you want to look at the family as well. If there are some dynamics going on in the family, those dynamics need to be addressed, because there could be someone in the family who has an undiagnosed mental illness, who may have a mood disorder that has never been treated, or an anxiety disorder that has never been treated, or there may be a history of suicidal behavior or suicidal ideation in the family. And if that child receives this individual therapy and some other kinds of therapy where the family is not participating, and you bring that child back into that environment that can trigger some of the issues that led them to go into treatment to begin with, you are actually doing that child harm and a disservice. And so to have a person receive treatment and then put them in the environment that may trigger some of those issues is something that is going to cause that child harm. So having the family take part in therapy can be beneficial in addressing any mental illness that might be going on in the family, and some other kinds of dynamics that might be found to be quite triggering. And one of the dynamics may be that in this family, we have some rules. And one rule is that we don't talk about feelings, or we don't talk about certain feelings, or certain feelings are not acceptable, or because you're in this family, you're supposed to be strong and not weak. And so those are the kinds of things that a family therapist would be able to address and maybe help some of the messaging problems or messaging issues that families have and may not be aware that they are sending certain messages to their children.
I think what's amazing as you were talking, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like when you talk about a trigger and the cumulative effect of what people go through, that as a parent or as a sibling, as somebody that lives in the house, my one thing I may not perceive to be suicidal worthy, but
Mhm.
in the grand scheme of things, when you start adding all of this other stuff up, that
Mhm.
one thing may be the trigger because, I mean, I've had teenage children who I think exasperated and embellished things and and exaggerated things. But I can only imagine if you have a mental health issue that you're dealing with, that those things that may be perceived as twice as bad now may be perceived as 20 times as
Mhm.
bad. Am I on track with that?
Actually, you are on track with that, and there is this model that they use at Harvard when working with children, and they said think of it as a seesaw. Think of it as a seesaw, and so right there in the middle, that balances the seesaw is the fulgrim, and if you have more things on one side of the fulgrim than the other, you're off balance.
Mm,
And so one of the things they talk about, well, let's begin taking off some things on that fulcrum, especially if they are negative experiences. How can we take these negative experiences off? And in some instances, what can we do to add some positive experiences? And one of the things that they've found, especially for children, when it comes to positive experiences, having that very good relationship with parents, feeling that they can go to parents and talk to them about what it is they're going through, and having the parents to actually listen and to understand and to be non-judgmental
mm.
as they talk. And so, yes, taking off some of those negative things that cause stress. And one way to kind of look at suicide is that the person has more pain than resources to cope with. And if we can take off some of those things that cause pain, and if we can add to the side of that seesaw that suggests now I've got some resources, you have a healthier child, and you're in the process of actually having a resilient child. And so all these things go together.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield, and you're listening to your member-supported public radio station, KTSU 90.9 on the FM dial. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. And if you'd like to call locally, a local suicide prevention line number is 832-416-1177. That's 832-416-1177. Mrs. Duncan, as you are listening to this, one of the things you talked about, and I'd like for both of you to comment on this, was the power of the internet, of social media, and the failure on your part, Mrs. Duncan. And I certainly don't want to blame you, because I don't think most parents understand the social media influence that is upon their children, and how the cyberbullying and all kinds of stuff goes on online, because most of us, who are of an older generation, just kind of go, man, don't even look at it, but these children are living online. I was reading a report that said children are spending 7 to 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
And now during COVID-19, I'm sure that number has gone up even higher, because they have to spend 5 or 6 hours a day just in school, not to mention the time that they're going to spend when they finish their schoolwork. You took your pain and you turned it into something positive in starting the Ashley Jadine Foundation. Talk about the mission and vision of that organization.
Well, with the mission, we've gone to health fairs, churches, and schools. And we've been able to, me as the mom, share Ashley's story so that they can see that. And I have a vision board that show all the different activities. It shows all her social media. We've opened up as far as letting them talk more and text less, and to know that you need to get help. And when you're talking to the students, then you want to find a trusted individual that you can talk to. We talk about that. And we talk about the social media because Ashley was a writer and she wrote in journals. So when I started seeing her journals, I talked to her, but she stopped going to the journals and she went to social media. So then after she went to social media, we weren't on social media, but we thought we would cut it off. And that's what I stress is you have to stay involved with your child's social media or find someone that you trust that can monitor. It's an issue that with Ashley's doing this has really helped me help my pain so that someone won't be alone. And that's the big thing, that it can happen to anyone. Anybody can be depressed. Anyone can be your anxiety. Because Anthony, for 6 years, my son, never really dealt with it, but he got through college in 4 years. He did things, but he masked it and he suppressed it because he just couldn't deal with it. He felt he failed. But God came to him through in New York when he had a poetry, and he started Dead the Silence. And what it was, dead the silence, because the silence in our house, and you need to go to school, you need to do this. Listen, my daughter had tattoos and none of us had tattoos. Now when I see tattoos through Ashley Jardine Foundation, I ask questions. What does that mean? What does that feel to you? I'm not being a art craft. You shouldn't have that. That doesn't look good. You know, AJF's mission with the scholarships, the health fairs, the seminars that we have in April, once a year, that Dr. Nero giving these panels, it's helped me get the pain out of me. Because I tell you, some days you feel good. The holidays is really tough. It's coming Thanksgiving, it's coming Christmas. But I've learned to celebrate her in such a way of giving back to others and giving to people to help them. Because when her birthday comes in July, when people are getting married, people graduating, I give to them. I want to encourage them. I want to love them and hug them and embrace them. I don't want to be angry that I don't get to have a grandchild. I didn't get to her go through a graduation or be married. I embrace them through AJF to do all you can the best. But the one thing I do say, you got to get help. You got to get some kind of help to help you release your pain. Because I feel whatever pain Ashley was going through is just like cutters. When people cut, it's not that they want to cut, and it's a lot of times they don't want to die. And we've talked about that. Pain is so deep that when she wrote, I can't deal with this anymore. Bye, I love you. Those things mean well because she took the time to text me before she died. That showed me that that child was very much a good person. And in her book of her journal, she wrote and asked the Lord to please help me. And it wasn't like we didn't go to church, we didn't believe in God, but sometimes you're talking to your friends and they've got problems themselves. And then you're on social media and everybody likes what you put and they see a gun, you got a gun, you're doing this. Because I read a lot of different YouTubes that came out. She was selfish. She had a relationship. Nobody knows but God. And when I asked someone to actually come and speak at the service, they said, well, was she a believer? I said, yes, she was a believer. Because we can't judge what God can judge. Only God is that. And you have that in the Bible where you have Elijah with 1 Kings 19, where he had depression. You have different people in the Bible that had depression. but sometimes you just can't reach that person enough. Because I thought she was well, and we were going all the get through that senior year, that summer, but all that was just a mass. And the December one time I left, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I came back, and her friends came by and they said, well, Ashley's gone. I said, one day Ashley's not going to be here. Because I would try to prepare myself. But you never can prepare yourself to lose you. Because I lost a sister. But what you do in this show, and to talk about suicide and depression, and the African-American people, we don't talk about that. We put stigma and we put shame. But if it comes from the pastor, because most of the time people going through things, they talk to the pastor or they talk to someone in the church, but does the church warm open to bring them in to say, I can help you. I can listen. We're going to work through this. This is not the devil. This is Satan. It might be all those things, but you've got to work through the problem of an illness, because I'd rather have a physical illness than a mental illness. Because you can see my broken bone, but you can't see my broken mind. And you can't, because to press, childhood trauma, we never know what some children are going through in their family, because everybody has a story. And in that story, you suppress it. And like she talked about triggers, things can happen to exacerbate.
Yeah. No, I agree. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real World, Real Talk. I'm your host, Dr. DZ Cofield. We are talking about suicide. September was Suicide Awareness Month, October Mental Health Awareness Month. And we are in the time of year when we see depression, anxiety, and the like at a rise, especially as we go into the holidays and people are struggling. Dr. Nero, would you help us? How can we help our young people develop a level of resilience in this day and time? So much is built around the idea of living for the likes. So many of our young people, they just live and I say often, if we live for people's approval, we will die from their rejection. Right. But we live for their approval, and people are living online for people's approval. How can we help build resilience in our children?
Certainly. So if we go back to the definition for someone experiencing some suicidal ideation, they're thinking that I see very few options of getting out of this pain that I'm in. And if we look at the definition, that when pain exceeds our resources, if we look at it as an equation, one of the things we want to do is, what can we do to reduce some of the pain? And so that's actually called unloading the negative. So what exactly is this pain about? And so if the pain is, okay, this young person may need to have therapy, to talk to a counselor. Is the pain that this is someone who is being bullied? And so we need to deal with that pain. If we're talking about COVID, is it that schools are closed and I'm not getting a chance to see my friends? So is there something that we can do to unload some of the pain or unload the negative? And part of that is being aware of what the negative may be. And then on the other side, how can we increase the positive? And so what are some things that would be positive for that individual? So loading up on the positive could be finding out what the individual's interests are, helping them to be able to explore things that they really enjoy doing. If this is someone who really values being able to spend time with certain people, what might that look like? How can we assist them in being able to do that? If they have a skill that we would like to see them to build, then definitely help them to pursue an interest, pursue a goal. So how can we help to increase the positive? And then the third thing is helping the child to now move into other kinds of areas of being able to do some things for him or herself. So during COVID, maybe this will be a real good opportunity for them to learn some time management and maybe to start participating in some of the things that can help the family during COVID. So maybe the child might be given an assignment or a chore to make sure that the groceries are there and ready to put in the order and have delivered to the home. Are there some other skills that the child can be given there in the home that is going to increase some skill sets that he or she may have? And so working on increasing skills is another way to build resilience, that children begin to feel better about themselves, their abilities, how they contribute to the family, as they are able to do things that are, of course, within their developmental stage. And so those are some of the ways in which resilience can be built. And one thing that I will say is certainly talking, being able to sit down, talk, having device-free moments where people are actually using eye contact to talk about their day, and people are actually listening to one another, affirming, encouraging, moments where there's a no judgment zone. Those are other things that can help to build resilience in children.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I tell you what, without exaggeration, suicide is a very complex issue.
Yeah.
I think, for people who may not have ever gone down that road with a suicidal ideation or an attempt, it's really hard for us to think about and be able to identify with the hopelessness that people are dealing with. And especially sad and tragic is to see young people who have not even really begun their lives. I know when you're in high school, middle school, you think, man, everything is the end of the world. And, all you have to do is keep on living and getting through that. Let me just give a couple of numbers for information. If you have a teen who is struggling with suicidal ideations, you can, or that teen can call 832-416-1199. That's 832-416-1199. If they would prefer to text, they can also text to 281-201-4430, 281-201-4430. And again, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 800-273-8255, 800-273-8255. Locally here in the Houston metropolitan area is 832-416-1177. Mrs. Duncan, thank you so much for telling your story. Is there anything you'd like to say as we get ready to close out on tonight?
All I'd like to say is look at Ashley Jardine Foundation, www.ashleysjardine.org. I say that you talk more, you text less, and you hold on to hope. Hope heals. And that you find a trusted individual that you can confide in, your teacher, your coach. Say something. If you know and you see something on social media, let somebody know. Stay involved with some kind of activity that keeps your mind in what you like to do. And stay updated, parents, friends, on your child or your spouse social media, because you find out more about the real person with social media, because you can't take it from people today. It's there. We have to deal with it and use it in a positive way, like I do now, trying to share inspirations.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nero.
Yes, I'd like to follow up with what Mrs. Duncan said. And this is a statement that I'd like to leave the audience with. it says that the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. And so having that relationship with your child is of extreme important, and being that person that they can turn to when they have an issue that they need to address is very important, especially when it comes to that child's resilience and being able to get past situations that they may consider to be traumatic or painful.
Well, I want to thank both of you ladies for being with us on tonight. It's been an absolute blessing, and I know we touched somebody's life. I know we encouraged somebody, and I believe we saved somebody's life tonight. And so I want to thank you all for being with us on tonight. The late Vernon John said, if you see a good fight, get in it. And I add, if you don't see a good fight, start one. And I think one of the things that I want to encourage people to do is to not only fight for your own mental wellness, but stop to fight for the mental wellness of those who are around you. Look at your spouse. You know, we often hear the saying, happy wife, happy life, but I like to use the phrase happy spouse, happy house. You use your influence. If you're in a good place, put your mask on and then help somebody get their mask on. In terms of our children, while they may have the ability in terms of technology, they don't always have the emotional maturity to handle what's coming at them on the internet. And so, you know, one of the things that I've learned, and I learned this the hard way, you all. And so when I share this information with you, it's not because I was a perfect parent, far from it. But here's what I will say. When I look back over my life, one of the things that I would have done is spent less time worrying about work and more time with my children. Because at the end of the day, no person has ever come to the end of their life and complained that they spent too much time with their children. And so be sensitive, listen, don't belittle in the name of making them tough. Be supportive and encouraging, and hear their pain and hear their hurt. I remember one time I was in love, boy, and it was middle school. I was in love with this girl, and my father made fun of me. He said, "Oh, that ain't nothing but puppy love." But you know what? It was still love to the puppy. And so make sure you encourage your children and support your children, walk with your children through those difficulties. And if you feel like you're in need of help, make sure you do what you need to do in order to take care of yourself. This is Dr. DZ Cofield signing off, getting ready for truth. They're in the building, coming in the house in just a moment. V. Michael McKay, David Goldstein, Asia, and the rest of the crew. All right, until next time, take care. God bless is my prayer.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real World, Real Talk episode. If you missed the show, visit ktsuRadio.com and listen to the podcast.
All right, thank you all, ladies. Take care.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let me get a picture. All right. All right. Let me see. Okay. Let me leave the studio.